Miss Adrienne?
So, good day, listeners and watchers. Today, we have a great opportunity to listen to a good discussion, a great debate between Mr. BJ Hall, who is a proponent of changing the way the commissioners are elected in St. Mary's County, and Josh, who has some dissenting opinions. Thank you, Josh, Guy, for joining us today. I am Adrienne Somerville. I am the CEO of two companies, Talent and Technical Solutions, and also Somerville Consulting Group. And I have the great vantage point today of listening to these amazing gentlemen discuss the pros and cons and be a very neutral listener with a great learning curve. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the discussion today. I look forward to the insightful dialogue.
Well, thank you, Miss Somerville. Where I want to start by talking about the legislation that actually started this discussion. It was HB House Bill 655 that was introduced by Delegate Brian Crosby in the 2021 session. Um, of the General Assembly. And the intent of the bill was to change how our current system of electing county commissioners um, in order to allow our commissioner districts to select um, their own commissioner. Right now, our county commissioners are elected at large, and the bill was designed to address that issue. I want to hand it over to Josh, and we can discuss what our current system is and how we got here.
So before Josh joins in, so when you say at large, we've got some listeners that may not be familiar with that terminology
Ah,
and that taxonomy. So can you elaborate just a little bit more before we
yeah,
pivot over to Josh?
yes, ma'am. So currently, everyone in the county, all the voters in the county, get to select a county commissioner for a voting district. Say, for instance, you live in county commissioner district 4. You would, if you are living there, you get to participate in the selection process for county commissioner of District 1. So every voter has the opportunity to elect every county commissioner that sits on the board of county commissioners here in St. Mary's County.
Okay,
And just
thank you
just
for that.
right now we have 5 county commissioners, we have a county commissioner president, and we have 4 county commissioner districts, and each district has a county commissioner.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification.
Good question.
All right, all set.
Yes, sir.
And I'll
Mr.
give you a
Guy,
little.
over to you, sir.
All right, I'll give a little overlay of how the current system came to be. In 1974, well, a little bit before 1974, 1973, Delegate James Manning McKay proposed a change to the way the county commissioners were elected. Originally, the electoral system was 3 commissioners, no commissioner president. The bill that was sponsored and passed by Delegate James Manning McKay changed that to 5 commissioners, with 1 being elected the commissioner president. So that's the current system that's available. From that, you have the commissioner districts. There's Commissioner District 1, which includes Ridge, Valley Lee, areas like that. District 4, which is primarily Lexington Park, California area. District 2, which is Leonardtown, Hollywood area. District 3, which is Mechanicsville, Charlotte Hall area. And of course, the commissioner president, which is the commissioner president. So all the county. So that's the current history there. Now, changes into our electoral process or our form of government that's been attempted in the past include a charter from 1972. Charter writing committee got together, was appointed by the commissioners, presented the charter to the county for referendum on the 1972 election. That one failed. A lot of politics behind that. And then in 1988, the League of Women Voters and several other groups pushed for a charter writing committee. One was appointed, included a diverse group of Republicans, Democrats, business leaders, and 1 member appointed by each commissioner. The charter went to referendum in 1989 in a special election, and that one lost. Recently, there's been some talk of code home rule, things like that. There hasn't been a charter proposal since 1989. And in terms of our current form of commissioner government, as I said, is based on that 1974 bill that was passed by Delegate James Manning McKay.
Roger that. Can you talk about how kind of the evolution of that bill, because there was a form of government that was proposed, and then they adjusted it because I think they initially wanted a full-time county commissioner president.
So one of the effects of the charter of 1972 was the changing of commissioners to what would be called councilmen. And with that proposal came the proposed executive position. So when you had the 1974 bill, Manning McKay took a part of essentially the 1972 charter in terms of the executive, turned that into the elected commissioner president, and then expanded that to 5 commissioners from 4 districts instead of 3 commissioners from what would be considered District 3, and then 2 from District 1. Now, granted, this was drawn way differently than today's districts at the time. And then, of course, more districts were added, District 4, District 2. So that's kind of the charter, and the elected executive out of that was kind of the basis for our current system, which is, of course, commissioner president, 4 commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
Roger that.
Thank you for that.
So you talked about when HB 655 was initially introduced, it started a crazy amount of debate in the House. Can you discuss? Do you remember any of the conversation that was around it on the House floor?
I know from Crosby's testimony, and Delegate Brian Crosby to be specific, his testimony was about it being a Jim Crow era policy, about the fairness of elections, and there's some valid, I believe that there's some valid and genuine argument about minorities feeling left out of and special groups feeling left out of the commissioner process. But I don't have all of the facts of the entire debate around the bill.
Roger that. A lot of the conversation came of stripping a lot of the voters from stripping votes from a lot of the voters, and it was introduced as a state bill instead of coming through the typical process where that should have been something that was handled with local courtesy. I think the argument for the bill that introduced the Jim Crow element is really what started a lot of the discussion, especially since it did not go through the traditional process. It gave the appearance of that we were calling everybody in St. Mary's County racist, and of the Jim Crow the Jim Crow era, or supportive of remnants of that era. I think that language muddied the water a bit and overshadowed some of the legitimate arguments for the bill. If we can, let me just kind of state where we came, how we came up with the bill, and I say we because
that'd be very beneficial.
I say we because the NAACP, we had our political action team met with Brian Crosby to have a discussion of ways that the Lexington Park area could have a stronger legislative presence, if you will. And we talked about charter government, coming up with making it a municipality. I mean, there were a lot of options that were presented, and Brian Crosby actually introduced the idea of vote by district, and allowing that area to elect, well, each district only to elect their representation, and it actually made a lot of sense when we had the conversation, because we all think about representative democracy, and you would assume that each district would have the ability to select. But once we actually started looking at the process, we realized that was not necessarily the case. The one of the reasons why the NAACP was involved was because the fourth district it has the densest concentration of minority voters. So um, being that being that district has has not selected well, I can't even say that they selected one, because was it what district was? No, Lancaster was District 4, wasn't he?
John G. Lancaster, who was the first African American commissioner for
Roger
St.
that.
Mary's County, was from District 4, correct?
Okay.
Mhm.
And so you would assume that you would see a lot more minority representation, or at least minority candidates that would come from District 4, but that has not been the case. And a lot of it, we assume, has been um, based off of disenfranchisement due to our current system, understanding that the commissioners um, are selected at large, and so ultimately diluting um, a decision that could be made by the District 4. So having that conversation, Brian proposed a bill, and we gained support throughout the state
Mm.
with by engaging other NAACP branches and the state to support. We it became more of a voting rights issue, and we pushed it as such. Um, and it should have remained that way, but it that those two words next to each other, Jim Crow, um, they ended up really dominating the conversation.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And so, if I can, let me talk about what I believe are some problems with some of the arguments. If you don't mind, let me give you a little.
Yeah.
So the Jim Crow era policy, I understand that at large districts in some areas has been used in the past to dilute minority votes and minority representation. And I'm not talking necessarily in St. Mary's County, but I'm talking, from states and different things like that. And so, but the current bill, as we talked about, that has established our current form of commissioner government, originated in 1974. Now, I understand the argument of possibly disenfranchising select minority groups or minority party voters. And that's one that we're going to discuss. I will say that when this bill came out, almost immediately the local Democratic Central Committee threw their full support behind it. And at the last public hearing, you had several stand up and say, well, St. Mary's County has always had at least one Democrat commissioner on the board. And I think that when you're arguing that the lack of Democratic Party wins for commissioner seats, that there needs to be a change based off of one party losing is not the correct argument to be had in favor of the bill. Because you look, the Democratic Party controlled county politics for over 100 years here in St. Mary's County. It wasn't until 1986 that you had two Republicans for the first time elected, and I think it was 50 years at that point. And it was only until 2014 that Republicans swept every commissioner seat. Prior to that, there was always at least one Democrat on the board. So that's a relatively new thing, and I think that the political argument from the Democratic Central Committee has actually hurt the main argument of the bill, and I wish it was more focused on that.
Real quick, just to
Yeah.
kind of address that piece, I think you're right, because we people have been able to highlight it as a partisan bill, but
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, if you talk about it, if you think about it, it's allowing the dominant party, regardless of party, to control the commission. So when it was the Democrats, it was when we were heavy Democrat, then it favored the Democrats. So I mean, it's you can see a neutral argument because it's benefited both parties at some point in time. So
Yeah.
it's you can see how having this will just I mean, now it's just a matter of it would just be a matter of recruiting more voters, to one party or another, and then
Yeah.
then you get to control the board.
Yeah. So
I,
oh, I'm
I
sorry.
just want to chime in quickly. So are we equating, I mean, Jim Crow, it's definitely strong words. Of course, it invokes a lot of emotions. But are we equating, race with party affiliation?
Well, no, I think we've kind of
No.
talked about two different issues. It was like
Yeah.
Okay.
we've let at this point we're not addressing the racial component. It was like,
We're now
but then
addressing the
The
politics
party
component.
right,
affiliation in
party
politics.
Yes.
affiliation.
Okay.
So like
Yeah. And
lately, because the latest arguments haven't really involved conversation around race at all.
Good.
It's actually been initiated and been dominated by party. So
yeah.
Excellent.
and so well, I don't know if that's excellent because is the reason why it gained so much momentum was the discussion of race, and then all of a sudden the
Mhm.
discussion of race was eliminated from the conversation. Now we're talking about party again. So
Well,
um
I
Okay.
I think if I can, because the Democratic Central Committee threw so much support behind this bill,
mhm,
and the commissioner candidates this time around had to pledge to support in district voting. I think that opened up a area of partisan divide. I think the argument, in all honesty, on more representation for the districts is a much stronger, even though I disagree with it, argument than uh, simply party affiliation. Because I don't think it helps when at a public hearing you have members of Democratic Central Committee stand up and say, "Oh, I'd like to have a Democrat on the board," because then it appears that the
Mhm.
change is based on um, politics and is not based on need for representation.
well, I
Mhm.
think one of the reasons why you see that is a lot of people that are not involved in the process are not aware of the changes that are happening behind the scenes. So it would take someone from one of the central committees or one of the clubs to actually to highlight the issue, but and their bias would just be um, obvious at that point. But it doesn't mean that it's not a legitimate complaint. That just means that they happen to belong to a group that would have a particular opinion, but it does not negate the fact that it's legit.
No, it doesn't, and I don't mean to assume that. I do mean that it does create a perception of political party influence in the decision. Uh, and I
Right,
think that for debate's sake, it would probably be best to not argue from that standpoint, especially in
right,
the political climate of St. Mary's County.
right. I think the best argument is just based off of representative democracy. If we have a comparison to the way that we do every other election, especially when we look at national politics, we would have an assumption that only the people of a specific district would be able to choose their representation, and
Hmm.
anyone outside of that district wouldn't have um, shouldn't be able to influence the outcome of that selection process. So um, I think that to me in itself is a key element that should just be highlighted. And if you actually pose that question to most people, I would assume if you didn't know what the system currently was, and we're not talking about changing what is, if we had a system and said, hey, if we told people there were 4 commissioner districts, and how should each district select their representation, you would assume that district would be able to be select its own,
Yeah,
So what
and
makes this more complicated than just that?
because it's a change. And so currently, um, it's like you're taking um, the ability to select away from people. So you now, if I live in District 4, I don't have a say in who represents 1, 2, and
Mhm.
3, and and it essentially restricts or decreases my ability to participate in the selection of our leadership, right?
Outside of my district only,
Well, in
right?
our county, if you
yeah,
argument would be the leadership of our county, not necessarily
Right.
out, the district be damned.
Hmm.
Yeah, and some of my concerns with in-district voting are generally based off of the idea that you only have one vote on a commissioner board, and so the idea, I think, that you would have stronger representation for Lexington Park on the board of county commissioners if you just had that one commissioner running inside that district. I don't know that that would be the outcome. It could be the outcome, and I don't argue against that, but the
I don't
outcome
think
could be very different because you would only have one vote on the commissioner board. Right now, with the at-large system, every commissioner has to run in Lexington Park. Their name appears on the ballot. I think that they'd be more inclined to at least take a look at those issues and those concerns than if you just had one who's trying to fight tooth and nail to get budgetary measures and the needed concerns. Because if that is the case, then you would have to believe that politicians are all going to be great people that really care about everybody in St. Mary's County, regardless of
they are.
district. And
They are. What are you talking about?
but I think the possibility of that is a little worrisome to me because of that possibility.
I don't think that the argument is really someone will fight harder, but I think that it's someone that the district should be allowed to select a person that aligns with their beliefs. Like currently, the county gets to make that selection for a district. So if you have two options there, and the district believes that one aligns with that district a little better than the other, but the other happens to align with the overall beliefs of the county, then the county would override the district. And so
Right.
it's not necessarily about would you fight harder. It's like, but would our issues be properly represented by the person that's sitting there?
Yeah, and all good points. But now, based on party data, voting data that we've had from past elections, from the area of the 4th Commissioner District, I believe that the Republican still tips out on top slightly. It's not a large win for the Republican candidate, but if you took the in-district voting for, let's say, the 4th District, Todd Morgan still came out on top in the contested election in 2010, and then I believe
unopposed
in
no.
2014 and 18, I think, but not in 2010. He was opposed.
Correct.
Mary
Washington.
Mary Washington. But he'd still come out on top in the 4th District, and I don't know the exact number precinct by precinct for this past election, but I believe from what I've known is that the needle slightly favored Scott Ostro over Steve Tuttle.
Roger.
So I think
but you can argue on that one that some voters make an assumption of outcome prior to going into election day. Based off of the dominance of one party in the county. So there is the element of disenfranchisement that I discussed in the beginning that comes into play as well.
And I don't argue the feeling of, as I said in the beginning, I think that argument is sincere and genuine, but I'm saying that based on the data, the numbers that are there, changing to in-district voting and saying it gives me greater representation when the data shows that the Republican, not what is considered the minority party in the county, and minority party meaning by registration number, still doesn't come out on top on the 4th District.
Roger that. But if you look at the numbers based off of registration, then there's the skew is closer to even instead of instead of it being so Republican dominant there in the 4th district. So
Right.
it allows for an opportunity for something different to happen within that district, even though the outcomes don't say that in the with the current set of data. So I think you do have an opportunity for that to be almost a purple district, especially considering how many unaffiliated voters that you have in that district as well.
Yeah, and another point, I'd say that the District 4 is the district that most people would consider to be the swing district most likely to flip in this scenario. I've seen arguments that District 1 would become
Yeah.
competitive, but based on, once again, the raw data that I have from past elections, it still favors Republican. The needle still moves to the Republican.
Yeah.
When looking at the history of county commissioners and the way they've been elected past elections, it is interesting to note that John Lancaster lost the 4th commissioner district. Both times he was elected as county commissioner, but won in Leonardtown, Hollywood, 7th district, Mechanicsville. And because he swept all those areas, he was able to carry himself into office. Although, once again, he did lose Lexington Park.
Well, see, but you got to realize that was it the composition, the racial composition of the county has shifted a bit, and the lines have shifted a bit as well. So, being that I don't have the census data by election district from his election, it would be difficult for me to respond to that one with a data backed response, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of the African American population resided on the border of District 1, District 4. So as you get down to Park Hall, Ridge, and
well, he did do well in Valley Lee too. So yeah,
Happy Land, baby. So
that's right. Yeah, that carrying him.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying, but that could have also been a party based outcome. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I hope you understand the generality of my argument, which is based upon the election data that I have.
Right.
That would skew, and I'm not saying it's a large push of 60% towards the Republican. It's probably 51-49. Mm-hmm. But the data does support the Republican outcome in all of the election districts currently. I'm not going to say that doesn't change in the next commissioner election.
Roger that. It was interesting watching the redistricting process this year, because we had an opportunity to draw lines in a way that would have been a lot more favorable. But once they adjusted the map to the current maps that were accepted, actually it was close to the best outcome. But it didn't gather it didn't gather in all the minority population that it could have, and if you look at balancing as far as party goes, it didn't do that as well. Even though I know that was not the goal of
right.
of that board, but it was definitely something that could have been achievable.
Yeah, and let me ask you, can you explain how the basic lines geographically of the 4th commissioner district, so people know what we're talking about when we mention the 4th commissioner district?
Yeah, the 4th commissioner district, it goes. Let's see. If you look at a map, you think about Chancellor's Run. Chancellor's Run as one of the borders, so that it follows like Chancellor's Run and grabs. I think it's a portion of, was it Callaway? Does it go to Callaway? Go south to Callaway?
It goes up towards Callaway, yes.
Right. And then I think it's cut off at actually no, it's cut off at 5, because Commissioner District 1 goes all the way up 5, almost to Leonardtown. And then now it goes down to Park Hall and cuts around Southampton. and comes back around toward the water right there at Spring Ridge, and comes all the way down, essentially down to Route 4, and comes back to to Three Notch, and heads back down
Right.
until it intersects again with Chancellor's Run.
Okay. Yeah. So that's yeah, and sadly now I think you're in the first district now. Is that correct, BJ?
I've been in the first district.
You got redistricted out.
I was almost in the fourth district. Scott Ostro would have had his hands full, baby. No. Anyway,
Oh
but yeah,
man.
I'm in the first district now.
So yeah, and
One of the arguments that
that's where we're at right now on the.
Well, one of the arguments that has been made was that the county commissioners serve as the executive branch of our county, and so that this should be, everyone in the county should have an opportunity to select the entire executive branch. But when you look at the definitions and some of the similar leadership examples, when you look at the word governing body, it also lists different executive bodies that have an executive plus a county a city council, or a county executive and the county commissioner. So in a similar fashion, we would look at our county commissioner president, even though he doesn't have any official powers over the board of county commissioners outside of essentially developing the agenda and running the meetings. He would be considered our executive, and then the rest of them would kind of fall under the board of county commissioners. So I think that that's not necessarily apples to apples when you just say that all of them serve as the executive. They could be looked at as a city council would.
So what
Yes,
do we want
so,
our viewers and
BJ
listeners to take away? What, just to add to what BJ and what you all think, what do you want the viewers and listeners to take away from the discussion? I mean, it's been educational and informative, but I'm just thinking, is there a call to action? Is there any steps, or what would you like for them to do?
I would like people to be more
Go for it,
informed of the discussion and the debate that's been going on in the county about this. You know, a lot of people are talking about it, and there's a lot of noise going on. But getting down to the bare brass, what this bill would do, why there's support of it, such as BJ laying out some solid arguments of support, and why I oppose it, and me laying out some solid, and that way people know some of the key points of the debate that's going on in St. Mary's County, because you hear a lot of noise about it. There's a lot of questions about it. And so hopefully when people see this, they'll have some of their questions answered, and we'll be able to say, oh, okay, well, I oppose it, or, oh, hey, you know, I think I support that idea.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Josh.
I agree with Josh. More than anything else, people need to be informed and not just listen to second, third hand information, because a lot of the hot topics have been pulled out of the argument and just kind of exaggerated, and it's distracted from the basis of the argument, which is who represents the citizens of each district and our county as a whole. It was like we should be really talking about, what's the right selection process, instead of us complaining about the basis of someone argument.
So this has been a very data-based discussion. Lots of numbers and statistics were thrown out. So the average constituent, I know, has access to this information. Where should he or she go if they wanted to read up more, learn more, ascertain a little bit more insight, and get very granular in terms of the data and the numbers?
There is, oddly enough, it's a little difficult to find, but you can find most of it on the county GIS map. I guess I could leave a link there when we when we post this, there's a way to view at least some of the information connected to the voting districts and whatnot on the GIS map.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
And then also for election results by precinct, which would give you in-district data, you can view that on the Board of Elections site here for St. Mary's County. But I wanted to go back a little bit because BJ was just getting into the executive versus legislative function of the county commissioners. And so, BJ, can you tell me, are the county commissioners, are they legislative, or are they executive, or are they a combination of the two?
They're essentially a combination of the two. And it's because the county commissioner president he essentially serves the role of an executive. But if you look at them as equal pieces, you can make an argument that all five of them make up the executive, right? But in my opinion, I look at them as legislative as a whole, with that one person being the executive.
Yeah. So there's always this discussion about defining the commissioners as either legislative or executive or a combination of the two. And in my opinion, the commissioners are primarily executive, but I do believe that they have a small legislative ability, small L. Here's why. Of course, they're going to be in charge of the budget, deciding how much money goes to things like public safety, of course, law enforcement, Board of Education, county roads, those sort of issues. However, through their main source of taxing authority, such as property taxes, impact fees, things of that nature, which is needed for county government, they have to go through the legislature, the state legislature, to get that taxing, bonding, borrowing authority. So the legislative function of our commissioners is quite limited. They basically have to rely completely on the state legislature to be able to legislate anything in terms of taxation. Now, of course, they can make, once again, legislative small L decisions such as zoning and ordinances, comprehensive plans, things like that. I would argue are more within the parameters of what you would see a legislator pass. But the main basis of legislature's ability to tax and create taxing authority relies with the state government, and the county needs their approval for things like that.
I think what you're just highlighting is just the limitation of our legislative reach. So I don't think that negates the fact that they do have legislative powers. It's just limited by the annotated code of Maryland. So
and that's what I wanted to point out.
By choice of the citizens.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it's interesting that we would vote to allow Annapolis to make decisions for us instead of allowing us to decide for ourselves. And I'm speaking this way. I'm speaking about the choice against the charter form of government, and because I think most of us would agree that the people in Annapolis don't necessarily understand the inner workings of St. Mary's County. So allowing them to control the rules that govern St. Mary's County just doesn't really align with our beliefs of that disconnect. So,
yeah. And so when you talk about charter government, there's been two charters that have been voted upon in St. Mary's, and the most recent one, the controversial substance of that charter bill was an appointed executive versus an elected executive. And that became a very, very heated point when deciding how to make a charter government. And ultimately, the voters rejected it. And the same thing with House Bill 655 is there's always been a talk about possibly putting it towards referendum. But there's been several proponents of the bill that have thrown little support behind the idea of a referendum. And I'm curious to know why there's not much support for a referendum on the bill. Maybe you can speak to that, BJ. I don't
Well,
have any.
I think because the majority party controls the vote. So given that the
Mm,
majority controls the vote and controls the narrative, then of course they would control the outcome of that vote. So the vote on the referendum. So it doesn't necessarily mean that well that may not necessarily be the case, but I mean I think it's a logical assumption to assume that the outcome is already predetermined if we just put it on referendum.
well, the issue that I have with not taking it to referendum is you have one delegate from St. Mary's County that supports this bill. You have two other St. Mary's County delegates that do not support this bill, and you have a state senator who has come out and opposed this bill. And historically, the St. Mary's County delegation, uh, as you mentioned this earlier, has a local courtesy rule in terms of getting bills passed. And I think that because of the way that this bill has been argued, because of the intense disagreement, it almost would have to go to a referendum for, I think, there to be a general acceptance of the outcome of the bill, because there's been a lot of debate about it and a lot of great points on both sides. And I think that if it was just pushed through at this point, there'd be a bit of a pushback and a unnecessary blow to the way our county would discuss this issue.
I agree. But I mean, if you can prove that it's a legitimate violation of the Voting Rights Act, which was part of the initial argument, then the vote is moot. So we can just say that it's unconstitutional and just change it. So I mean, just depending on the argument and the route that we go about to change this um, this form of selection. I mean, we can. It doesn't necessarily have to go to the vote.
Yeah, and I'd say that would be a slightly more difficult thing to prove
Yeah,
based on the voting data that we have.
true.
Would be a slightly more, and I'm not saying that in 4 years or 8 years the argument for in district voting will not be a strong argument, because demographics are always changing, party registration is always changing in St. Mary's County. But I'm saying right now at this point, based on the voting data that I have, based on the election data that I have, and based on the history of St. Mary's County and the way we've elected commissioners, I don't see the exact reason to change. And
Well, so it's one of those things where if we had a campaign to truly educate a lot of our voters and have had a larger turnout, I think that you may see a different outcome. Um, Based off of the data that we have now, you're absolutely right. But even if you go back to the way that the charter was selected, or the charter was voted down, I mean, we were only talking about 20% of the vote. And back in the day, and was it when the latest one was voted down back in with 88? I mean, we were only talking about 25,000 people, that
mhm,
25,000 voters. So now we're triple that. So we're
yeah,
talking about a total different group of people, and there's no telling how that outcome um, could play out if everyone was truly informed about what the system currently is and the options that we have as far as electing our county commissioners.
yeah, and that's why I think this conversation that we're having right now, that people will get to view, is very, very important. And I'd say with the charter government of 1989, one of the biggest issues was they chose an off election year.
Yeah.
And so they chose 1989. It's like, nobody wants to go out and vote in 89. So now the 72 charter has had a greater turnout, primarily because it was on a presidential election year.
Mm.
And certainly there was more hype and support and against the 1972 charter, as that was the first one debated. And there were really some great countyans involved in that debate. So
Right.
um, And
It's funny how those names look. I had to read all the first names because it sounds like the same people that are in office right now. It's like McKay, Jarbo, Guy. It was like, oh my God.
there's a lot of us.
Roger that. Yeah, I definitely appreciate you taking the time out. The funny part is like I think our off the camera conversations go in a lot more depth, and I'm wondering what prevented us from getting to that point. But maybe we should just have a hidden camera one day following us around so we could talk about a lot of our political issues.
Yeah, I tried to keep this within simpler terms because I don't want to get the debate bogged down with unnecessary long histories of the founding of St. Mary's County or anything like that, and the politics of the day. But I wanted to keep it short, kind of shorter, so that people could understand the pro arguments and then the opposition arguments without having to listen directly to what I consider just being background noise. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not really getting to the root of the arguments. So I hope that's what we did. So
hopefully, if nothing else, we can edit it down so we can highlight some of the main points. We can figure out how to chop this thing up. And more than anything else, we need to make sure that we show people what's behind you, and everybody understands how you're a historian of the county.
Yeah,
and all of its elections.
Yeah, I got a lot of crap, sadly. But someone's got to take care of it, so someone's got to have it.
Roger that. Well, thank you
It was
both.
a great discussion.
Yeah. Thank you both for allowing me to come on here and give me an honest, good debate. I appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you.
I guess we
Nice
can sign
to meet
out
you,
now.
Josh. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you, Mr.
yeah, nice
Hall.
meeting you.
All right, nice talking to y'all.
There you go.